Welcome everyone. Good evening to all of you, and thank you for joining this webinar on affordable housing and housing finance. We are actually gathered here to celebrate the 25 years journey of work that has been showcased and put forth by Mahila Housing Trust. The partners which we have, or the panelists that we have today, David Smith from AHI, Somesh Tiwari from Seva Agrarian Limited,
Hi.
Mr. Kulshekhara Chakravarti from NHB. We are all joining Bijal Brahmbat to celebrate this journey of
Hi.
25 years of incorporation. And I will start the panel with some broad comments and opening remarks as the moderator. I'm not wearing the hat of MD and CEO of a Seva Agrarian Limited or a affordable housing finance company. Our experience and our work will be definitely presented by Somesh Tiwari, the Chief Operating Officer, who is part of the panel. So let
Yes.
me start by uh, giving broad 3-4 comments to set the context for this panel discussion, and also some of the presentation that will be done by Mahila Housing Seva Trust. So broadly speaking, since independence, India started becoming a welfare state, and therefore the policies which were developed by any government which was in the power focused on safe and secure housing. In fact, if many of us may recollect that we did have a tagline of roti, kapda or makan, which simply translated as food, clothing and shelter, became an integral part of national policy framework in early 60s and 70s. In the 60s, 70s and 80s, as far as the demographic division was concerned, it invariably, any kind of housing scheme or housing policies just broadly demarcated was into urban and rural spaces. By mid 70s and in the entire 80s, within India, the pace of migration from rural areas to urban spaces in search of better livelihoods gained momentum. This phenomenon led to increase in slums, unorganized living spaces with very low access to basic utilities, and congested clusters of makeshift dwelling units, which started coming up in our so-called cities or urban locations. Now, post liberalization, and as the Indian economy started opening up from early 90s onwards, the pace of this urbanization and the pace of migration also increased. Words like peri-urban or semi-urban localities, rehabilitation of slums, or slum development started surfacing as part of national policy framework and are the then 5-year plans which were put forth by the Planning Commission. It was soon realized that these so-called slums and its population were actually providers of the support services to the more organized and formal housing societies and urban working spaces. The focus on urban planning, provision of basic infrastructure for various income groups started being highlighted, which led to various schemes being launched by the then central government and various state governments. Words like EWS, economically weaker section, or dwelling units for lower income groups, LIGs, MIGs, that also started cropping up in all our discussions. However, as we all know, the pace of urbanization was far outnumbered by any implementation efforts of the government authorities. And therefore, the sheer market size of households from low income families to lower strata of middle income groups uh, was so humongous that it became a business opportunity for lending institutions such as banks and non-banking financial institutions. As an offshoot of mortgage finance, the phrase affordable housing started gaining popularity as India entered new millennium. Now, broadly speaking, the even as high income and middle income household, which is basically a more formal income group, the housing in those segments practically exploded. However, in the informal segment, which is what this panel discussion will address, in the informal segment, the foray of affordable housing or penetration of housing finance was hampered because of the lack of credit assessment or credit kind of availability, which was available in the public domain for the informal sector workers. The final part of my comment is that this particular affordable housing segment has multiple linkages with ancillary sectors such as home improvement, home construction, access to basic infrastructure, and therefore has a significant multiplier effect for the nation's economic growth. So today I'm very happy to have panelists who are showcasing extensive experience, not only in implementation of affordable housing and various kinds of models that in their lifetime they have implemented, or any projects that they would have implemented, but they are also coming coming over here to talk about their efforts in technical assistance globally, by supporting the government to develop right kind of schemes, which will be showcased by David Smith from Affordable Housing Institute, and eventually as a technical assistance provider, what led them to become an investor into a affordable housing company. Similarly, as a policymaker and as a regulator, Mr. Chakravarti from National Housing Bank will be talking about his experiences, and also the eventual shift of the current government or present day administration on housing subsidy or housing for all, and NHB's own views about supporting different kind of housing finance models, because they also are an investor to various kind of affordable housing companies. Similarly, along with that kind of view, we also have excellent experience coming in from Bijal Brahmbhatt on different aspects of housing finance and affordable housing for informal sector. And same thing on from Somesh Tiwari of having working on small ticket size in larger banks like Citibank and ICICI to affordable housing companies, and how the operations of affordable housing companies can be ramped up by continuously pushing this kind of focus on informal income and informal property titles. So we are in fact going to have a very, I would say, a very vivid and a very excellent presentation from all these panelists. So let's get going. I would now ask Konika from Mahila Housing Trust to present briefly about Mahila Housing Trust's work, and also talk about the new book on the city plan, city makers, that was authored by Madam Bijal Brahmbhatt and Mrs. Renana Jabwala. So over to you, Konika, to take this forward.
Thank you, Shruti ji. Namaste, everyone. Mahila Housing Trust has been working for over 25 years for poor women in the informal sector, trying to organize and empower them to improve their habitats and their living and working environments. The mission of MHT is to help them achieve a dignified home, dignified work, and a dignified life. MHT has been working across India in more than 36 cities now on 3 major domains: habitat development, climate resilience, and participatory governance, and has impacted almost 2 million lives directly across India. Now let me tell you about the book that MHT has launched as a part of our Silver Jubilee celebrations. This book, The City Makers, is about women from the informal sector who have shaped our cities. On an average, poor constitutes about 40% of our population in our cities, yet they are often ignored and overlooked by the city authorities, planners, and policy makers. As you all know, they live in informal settlements, which are often dense and crowded. Many do not have access to basic services like water and sanitation. They do not possess legal titles, nor do they have any kind of social security, and therefore very limited access to credit. This book, The City Makers, tells you about the stories of women from different cities who, from the support from MHT, have come together and collectively improved their households, their settlements, as well as their cities by supporting the city authorities by improving the habitat level policies to make them pro poor and pro women. In context to today's webinar subject, the book fairly describes how accessing affordable housing is still a challenge for poor households with informal title and informal income, and how MHT has played a role in addressing these challenges by playing a pivotal role in establishing institutions that have catered towards fulfilling these gaps. If you wish to buy a copy of the book, the purchase links have been given below in the chat box. Thank you.
So before I move on, I am supposed to also announce that this is being recorded live, and there is going to be social media live updates as well. So I just wanted to inform everyone on that aspect. Now going forward, these overall structure, I'll just brief everyone about the structure of the panel discussion and the flow of all the presentation. So we'll begin with a brief video on which will be focusing on Geetaben Thakur's foray as a chairperson of a housing cooperative society, and this essentially showcases MHT's or Mahila Housing Seva Trust work on working with the various kind of developers in providing affordable housing to informal segment. And this particular video will also focus about MHT's work into the technical assistance that it provides to the women like Geetaben Thakur and many like her. So let's go ahead and have a look at this video, please.
મારું નામ ગીતાબેન રોહિતભાઈ ઠાકોર છું. આંબાવાડીમાં રહું છું. અભુજીના કુવાના જે છાપરા છે એમાં હું રહું છું અને હું 4 ચોપડી ભણેલી છું. છાપરામાંથી અમારા શાંતાદીપ સોસાયટી હાઉસિંગ કોર્પોરેશન બની ગઈ છે. એની પણ હું વાત અમારી સોસાયટીની હું તમને કહું છું. મારા લગ્ન થયે 35 વર્ષ થયા. 35 વર્ષમાં અંદર અમે અમારા જે છાપરાની અંદર ચોમાસામાં અમારે બહુ જ પાણી ભરાતું હતું, તો અમને એટલી તકલીફ પડતી હતી કે અમારે રસોઈ કરવાની પણ તકલીફ પડતી હતી કે ઘરમાં બહુ જ પાણી ભરાતું હતું, તો ઘરમાં અમારો રસોઈ કરવાની તકલીફ પડતી હતી. તો અમે પલંગમાંના ખાટલામાં ગેસની સગડી મૂકી અને અમે રસોઈ કરતા હતા અને પલંગમાં જ અમે જમતા હતા. પછી અમારા ગટરના પાણીની સુવિધા તો હતી જ નહીં. અમારો MHTમાંથી પરિવર્તન યોજનાનો અમને લાભ મળ્યો. એમાં અમને 7 સુવિધાનો લાભ મળ્યો. અમને 7 સુવિધાઓ મળ્યા પછી અમને અમારા ઘરનો એટલો ડર હતો કે અમને અહીંયાથી કોઈ ખાલી કરાવશે એમ કે રબારીના ભરવાડ આવીને અમને ધમકી આપતા હતા. તો પછી અમારા MHTની બહેનોને અમે મળ્યા, તો બહેનોએ એવું કીધું કે આપણે એક સરકારી યોજના છે, તો તમારા ઝૂંપડપટ્ટીમાંથી ફ્લેટ થઈ શકશે. એ યોજના છે. બહાર અમે કલેક્ટરની ઓફિસે ગયા. કલેક્ટરની ઓફિસે જઈને અમે 7 બારના ઉતારા કઢાયા. 7 બારના ઉતારા કઢ્યા પછી અમને ખબર પડી કે આ સરકારી જમીન છે. પછી અમારી આ ઝૂંપડપટ્ટીની બહેનો, MHTની બહેનો, પછી બિલ્ડર સાથે, મ્યુનિસિપલ કોર્પોરેશનના જે સાહેબ સાથે અમારી જે વાત થઈ, પછી અમારે એગ્રીમેન્ટ કર્યા. ઝૂંપડામાંથી ફ્લેટ બનાવવા માટે એગ્રીમેન્ટ કર્યા. પછી અમને આઈ કાર્ડ આપ્યા. અમને બિલ્ડરે એવું એગ્રીમેન્ટ કર્યો હતો કે જ્યાં સુધી હું તમને મકાનની ચાવી ના આપું ત્યાં સુધી હું દર મહિને તમને 3,000 રૂપિયા તમને હું ભાડું આપીશ તમને. બધા અમારા ત્યાં એગ્રી હતા ફ્લડ કરવા માટે. એટલે અમુક લોકોએ 10 જણે અમારી ઉપર કેસ કર્યો. 10 જણે કેસ કર્યો અને અમે 11 કેસ અમે જીતી ગયા. પછી અમારો ઝૂંપડપટ્ટી પાડીને અમારે ફ્લેટ કરવાનું ચાલુ કર્યું. અમે 1 વર્ષની અંદર એક રૂમમાં રહેતા હતા, એની જગ્યાએ અમને ફ્લેટમાં સુવિધાઓ અમને મળી ગઈ. એમાં ફ્લેટની અંદર દરેક સભ્યોનો 2 રૂમ, રસોડું છે, સંડાસ બાથરૂમ અને પાણીની સગવડ અમારે સારી રીતે છે. અમારી સોસાયટીનું નામ શાંતાદીપ કોઓપરેટિવ હાઉસિંગ રાખેલ છે અને અત્યારે સોસાયટીની અંદર અમારા 49 લોકો સભ્યો રહે છે અને 49 સભ્યોને હું ચેરમેન છું અને અમારે 11 કમિટી બનાવેલી છે અને હું ચેરમેન તરીકે આખી સોસાયટી સંભાળું છું. અમારી સોસાયટીમાં કંઈ પણ અમારે નિર્ણય લેવો હોય તો 11 બહેનો કમિટીની ભેગી થઈ અને અમે નિર્ણય લઈએ છીએ અને એનો ઠરાવ પાસ અમે કરી અને ઠરાવ નંબર અમે નાખીએ છીએ. અમારી સોસાયટીમાં અમે એવો એગ્રીમેન્ટ કરેલો છે કે 1 થી 10માં 200 રૂપિયા જો મેન્ટેનન્સ જેનું ના આવે તો એના રોજના 10 રૂપિયા લેખે અમે દંડ ફાળો અમારા લેવાનો એ અમે નક્કી કરેલું છે. અમારા અહીંયા પહેલાં ઝૂંપડપટ્ટી હતી તો આજુબાજુ ફ્લેટનો કોઈ કિંમત કે ભાવ નહોતા. અમારા ઝૂંપડપટ્ટી તૂટીને અમારા જે ફ્લેટ થઈ ગયા અહીંયા એના પછી આજુબાજુ ફ્લેટોના બંગલાના ભાવ બહુ જ વધી ગયા. ફ્લેટમાં આવ્યા પછી અમે બંગલા કામ હાલે બી અમે કરીએ જ છીએ. પહેલાં ઝૂંપડપટ્ટીમાં રહેતા તો 10 વાગે 11 વાગે જતા હતા અને ફ્લેટમાં આવ્યા પછી ઘરમાં બધી અમને સુવિધાઓ મળી તો અમે ફટાફટ કામ બામ પતાવી અને લગભગ અમે અત્યારે 8 વાગે બંગલા કામ કરવા માટે જતા રહીએ છીએ. અને અમારા ત્યાં બધાના ધંધાકાર રોજગાર થોડું વધી ગયું છે અને બધા સારી રીતે ખુશીથી રહે છે.
So this video, as we also focuses MHT's work on slum rehabilitation and as an intermediary, the role it played between bridging the gap of understanding of this kind of informal sector or informal household, which was led by Geetaben Thakur and likes of her, along with the dialogue and communication with the government authorities. So it not only is about improving the living condition of this kind of households, but it is also about empowering these women to negotiate with various kind of government authorities and also have that kind of a stature within their community to become chairperson of such a housing cooperative societies where all women are the key members and they are the ones who are the decision makers on the upkeep and maintenance of their dwelling units. So with this particular video, while we talk about affordable housing as sort of giving out more and more new loans of home construction or home repairs, slum improvement and slum rehabilitation also can be viewed very closely as far as the affordability of dwelling units or housing is concerned. And that is something which many state governments are also focusing on through in various kind of schemes that they have. Moving on, we will start with our panel discussion. The first panelist, David Smith. The idea is to have an overview of David's extensive work and AHI's extensive work in providing technical assistance to in various countries, including India, to government authorities and to civil society institutions like Mahila Housing Trust, and eventual foray into becoming an investor and supporting the growth and growth of housing finance company like Sevagrarin Limited. So I will not get into great details about the entire bio profile of David Smith. The David that I know is the one who one can reach out very easily, who is always accessible to share any kind of thoughts about growing your own organization or any innovative ideas that one has. So over to you, David, and happy to hear from you, your presentation on AHI's work.
Thank you. And I will put up my own slides because I will tell all you fine folks that I am self-taught in this business. I started as a typist. I started as a T-boy cum typist 46 years ago. The picture that you see here is a day that changed my life. This is October 7th, 2007 in Ahmedabad, the first day I met Bijal and Jayshree of Seva Bank and Mahila Housing Trust. And I was there because the Gates Foundation had given us a little bit of money to help us figure out how to crack the problem of slum upgrading. I'm old. I'm a banker, an investment banker. I do structured finance. I'm an unlikely pioneer to be sitting with my backpack at 38 degrees centigrade in August or October in Ahmedabad in Bijal's office. But somehow or other, as she fed me tea and samosas and pakoras, we got along. And we got into a discussion about, well, what's the next thing that Mahila Housing Trust should do? And the answer was help provide the money to enable people to fix up their homes. And that's what we're about at AHI. I've worked all around the world. AHI is a 20-year-old nonprofit. We've worked in 50 countries. We're currently working both with Save Agree Rent and in the Maldives, and those are places that are similar but different. And our magic phrase is that you need advice and you need money at the same time. Advice is the recipe. Money is the ingredients, and between them, you can make impact, which is the nourishing meal. And having been a consultant for a banker for 45 years and a consultant for 30 years, I've learned that you have a significant challenge. You need people to trust you. You need people to follow your advice. Shruti gave a very nice introduction there. The easiest way to get people to follow your advice is to put up some money alongside them. Lots of people come and say, I have good advice for you, use your money to do it. We concluded it was better to come along and say, we have good advice for you, let's use some of our money to do it. And that was the idea that was hatched when I was sitting in Bijal's office on October 7th. Affordable housing, I will tell you, is a global challenge. It is where jobs go to sleep at night. It is where domestic workers' jobs go to sleep at night. It is where the jobs on which our society depends go to sleep at night. And in urban contexts, it always costs money. The other part, affordable housing is pro-women. It helps health, education, sanitation, gender equity, income generation, home-based work, informal work. Every country in the world has discovered that affordable housing is something that is an important matter of national policy. And they've also discovered that directly as government, they're not very good at it. They need people like the folks on this call. And the part of the reason they need that, and was Shruti's introduction really touched me, it was quite lovely, is because housing finance, it doesn't seem this way, but it's all about trust. We have a borrower. You saw in Geeta Ben, you heard in her voice the things she had to go through and the pride she feels now at having succeeded. And that is built up over time by turning her into a borrower, helping her with financing, helping her and her family get a suitable home. That happens before the home. She told a story about all the things they had to do. And then think about the element of trust. She and her women colleagues decided the most important thing to do for our neighborhood is to tear those homes down and build new ones, even though we are afraid of being moved off site. So I spend a lot of time, and the ladies at Mahila Housing Trust spend a lot of time building trust. Trust is very personal. Trust is not about institutions, it's about people. And it's important for you all to understand that every person at Mahila Trust, every person at Seva Gri Rin carries the values of the whole organization and carries the values. And there's a reason that it's called the Seva family of companies, because that is the highest trust relationship that people have. Government needs people like Mahila Housing Trust. I wish India had 20 more of them, because government discovers that you need private entities to take risk. You need private entities to go and innovate and make change. You need private entities to build an organization and to deliver products. And so what does it take? And why did we not only help Mahila Housing Trust, but we also helped get Seva Gri Rin, otherwise known as Sitara, off the ground? Is because you folks have an unbelievably good understanding of what informal women need to build their lives and their families' lives. You have a deep knowledge of housing and its importance, and every community in which you operate, you are embedded and you are trusted. And all of that was evident from the first day when I was sitting there with Bijal, because it was in the name of the entity, Mahila Women Housing Trust. And I'm still here 14 years later and proud to be here.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much for emphasizing the word trust and emphasizing the word that whatever that is being done by Mahila Housing Seva Trust and Seva Group of institutions, of which Seva Gri Rin is an integral part, relies on this trust and also the empathy that we carry to our customers or our members or our borrowers. It's also important to understand the right kind of capital being made available for newer model of affordable housing, which is what in many ways Seva Gri Rin is trying to implement and has successfully done so over last 5 years. Basically the point, and I'll weave into the next presentation which we will have from Somesh Tiwari, the Chief Operating Officer of Seva Gri Rin. The affordable housing caters to a diverse demographic group with household income ranging from INR 12,000 to INR 30,000. By very definition, affordable housing by the policymakers, that is, or the regulators, where earlier it was NHB, now it is RBI. By very definition, affordable housing is a loan or a credit which can range anywhere from 1 lakh in Indian rupees to 35 lakhs in Indian rupees. And therefore, there is a whole gamut of models which are available. However, the mission with which the company was formed, which is Seva Gri Rin Limited, and which actually got its experience from the various projects and various work that was done by Mahila Housing Seva Trust, also by Seva Bank in informal sector, by providing different kind of mortgage loans to this segment and understanding different kind of property titles. So the focus of this company is to continuously push the parameters on how do we legalize various kind of property titles which are available in different states of this country, and continuously evolve and make a very good robust credit assessment model for these different kind of informal incomes that we come across in different states. So the work that has been done by Seva Gri Rin is to not only implement this model, but also to take it to a scale where it becomes a good business opportunity for more and more investors to invest in this kind of model, and more debt funders to support the growth story of this kind of companies. So with that, I will pass on the baton to Somesh Tiwari. Somesh, I'm very glad that he is part of the core team of Sevagrahin Limited. In fact, the operations that one sees of Sevagrahin actually started when Somesh joined this team, and he carries with him almost 20 plus years of experience of working in the various banks and various affordable housing finance company. So over to you, Somesh.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. Of course, the journey with Seva is indeed a wonderful one. A lot of learning and an inclination towards the kind of one's accommodation or one's consideration towards the very needy people in the society is one thing which I've definitely learned a lot here. And that, believe me, that gives me immense pleasure and satisfaction. Now, the journey with Sevagrahin started in the year 2015, and the July 2015 we actually started the business operations. Little bit about Sevagrahin, its milestones and what we have achieved till date. Our target segment is, of course, the women and families of informal segment. We have disbursed some 10,500 loans till date, which constitutes to somewhere around 35,000 plus citizens of this country. Disbursement amount is approximately 273 crores till date. We have a portfolio that is AUM of somewhere 240 crores till January 31st, 2021. The average loan size that we operate into is 2.65 lakhs, which is an average of the AUM, the outstanding portfolio. And the average tenure we are considering is somewhere around 9 years. Sevagrahin is headquartered in. My product positioning is definitely based on two factors.
Somesh,
those factors.
Somesh, I'm sorry to interrupt, but can we have the presentation shared either from you or from the MHT support team?
Yes, I can share the screen. No, it's not to me. I would request MHT. Yes, it's there now. Yeah. So my target position, that is the product positioning, is based on the two problem statements when we started this organization, Sevagrahin Limited. And those were the two challenges which we confronted at that time after a lot of research and trying to position our product. First was to overcome the basic issue of informal income, how to evaluate it, what is the market for informal income. And second was, of course, the legality part, which was the kind of tenure or the kind of property tenure that we can actually cater to. So these were the two problem statements which we tried to overcome. As far as the market of affordable housing, we ensured that as per the 2011 Census Ministry of Housing, Urban Poverty Elevation MSG report, it was 18.7 million. That was the shortage that was raised. And out of which we focused primarily on the economic weaker section of the society, which contributes almost 80% of the total target segment. And this constitutes to 10.55 million shortage of houses in India. That was the biggest chunk where we were we are actually focusing right now. The total available market for India, that is 46.8 million. The services market is, of course, 180 million. And the self-employed, where we are targeting, is actually 162 million. Now, SGRL has overcome this challenge by creating expertise in understanding the profile and informal income assessment. This is where we pitched in. And the second part, what we did is, I'll take you through the journey and how we actually tried and overcome is, the second part is the serviceable, obtainable market we discovered for this part is, of course, 8.5 million is the progressive tenure, where some or the other document of the property is actually claimable. And of course, 16.5 million is the target, which constitutes to 22% is the secure housing, where you are actually quite secure in terms of legalities. So SGRL has overcome this challenge of transforming transitional and secure tenure into a more formal tenure. This is how. Now moving to the journey, what we did is activities that created an impact actually is by legal advocacy and financial advocacy. Now transform informal title to transitional informal title is through what we have realized in the market is we have discovered many legal metrics out of it. And in those, and that vary from state to state and location to location. I can actually broadly list down few of the activities that we actually do while hand-holding the customers and guiding them all through the journey from login of the case to the disbursement of the cases or the loan accounts. And this is, what we do is registration in revenue records. We create mutation in land records. We help customer reach out to the correct desk or the windows in the municipalities or the authorities where they can actually execute these kind of activities to make their informal title into a formal one. Creating equitable mortgage registration, which is called EM registration or MODT. Again, creating a registered mortgages, the properties which are, of course, transitional properties to secure the mortgage. What we do is largely do the registered mortgages, though I can always say that it's not 100% required to create a mortgage for a housing finance company. I think the Chakravarti sir would actually definitely be taking this part again, but definitely to make housing finance business more secure, this is one step that most of the organization takes, which is registered mortgage. Then again is the dependency or the high dependency on doctrine of adverse possession, where 13 years of possession without any claimable claim from the second or the third party is where we can actually rely. So that is the Possession Act that comes into picture, which is under the Limitation Act. And then advocating the local and state governments to reach out to the customer, becoming a coordinator between the government and the people at a particular place or in the particular mohalla or areas. Then what the next step we achieved is getting into a tripartite agreement with the government and the customers, like we did with few of the places like Delhi under DUSIP, Delhi Urban Slum Improvement Board. Again, we executed some similar kind of an MOU with JDA. We did it with Ujjain Municipal Corporation and Indore Municipal Corporations. And those, believe me, those were the very successful kind of a projects, especially the DUSIP project, where we could able to actually execute some 100+ tripartite agreements and signed an MOU between the customer and the Delhi government. Then there is the 13 years of search, which actually authenticates the kind of legal transactions carried through chain. So this is the kind of a legal advocacy drive that we actually adopt while creating the mortgages. Then there are few financial advocacy points that we generally follow while giving loans. Our customer is not very literate, and they don't have quite a good that is amount of exposure in terms of market. They are a bit hesitant in reaching out to the banks and talking to government employees and all. We worked as an intermediary, or you can call as we handhold them. We take them to the banks, open their account. We also educate to manage home budgets, helping to create identification proof, Aadhaar card. Debt consolidation is one point where we pitched in heavily, because our customer is quite known to the microfinance companies. They have very expensive kind of debts that they are actually overburdened through debts, high rate of interest debts, where we help them by consolidating those debts, by offering them good amount of money at a lower rate of interest comparatively. Then what we do is create an alternate income source by providing access to government programs run by SEWA. So these all are the activities that actually creates an impact while giving loans to them. So a little bit story about the impact we have created is our portfolio. 46% of the portfolio is we have converted the asset in the name of women. Those count to somewhere around 4,145 cases out of the 10,500 cases that we have converted. The asset in the name of women, we created an impact here. Again, is the houses converted from Kacha to Pakka. That constitutes to somewhere around 31.47%. That is 2,833 loans that we have disbursed to convert the property from Kacha to Pakka. And the number of loans with progressive tenure, that is from informal title to completely formalized title, is almost 45%, which constitutes to 4,104 cases that we did it till date. Now, this validation of the product positioning, that is what we are doing and where we are actually focusing, can be drawn from the next slide, which is actually where we are actually focusing on EWS segment. That is where the ask or the shortage was 10.55 million units, and where the identified income as per the credit linked subsidy schemes, that is under the PMAY-U, was up to 3 lakhs. And we hold a portfolio of somewhere around 60%. Again, the LIG segment, lower income group segment, where we have contributed somewhere around 34%. So this clearly indicates that some 94% of our total portfolio is actually focused on the EWS and LIG segment, where the income is below 6 lakhs per annum. And over to the next slide, where we have actually showcased the way we have maintained, or we could able to maintain, the quality and quantity of our portfolio at Sewagrah is, there are some 6 pillars, where the first is the high cost of sourcing. Since the loan size is too low, then of course there is a automatic kind of a costing burden that comes over the organization, and the sustenance becomes a problem, definitely. So it's a self-sustainable model. So to develop that kind of a model, what we have planned is a mix of sourcing strategy, where we do the self-sourcing. We have the service centers which provide us the cases, and then there are government tie-up where we get the cases in bulk. So the second challenge is the credit assessment. What we have followed is, we have actually adopted a 5-stage approval strategy, where one of the team member appraises the case, another set of people, another vertical actually does the soft approval. Then there is a principal sanction of the cases. Then the third vertical again comes and does the legal approval, and the final approval is done from head office through the ops, which actually signs off the checks or does the NEFT. So this is one. So what we have done is, we have always followed the maker and checker kind of a strategy, so that there is no confrontation in the responsibility and authority of the people, and it also keeps the complete balance between the product, between the process, and between TAT, that is turn around to do the cases. And this is all done through system, which we have actually developed all through in the name of LOS and LOS, which is actually run by CISAG. Then there is a tenure and a ticket size. So we kept it a shorter tenure. So the average tenure is, of course, 9 years, vis-a-vis, we can go up to 20 years, but definitely that tenure is actually kept at 9 years on an average. And what we adopt is we do a stage-wise kind of a disbursement to actually secure our loan amount and ensure that the amount which is disbursed is used in that part only. So that is crunching part. Then there is a security collateral that I've already discussed and elaborated. That is through doctrine of adverse possession, mutation, registration in revenue and land records. Then there is a collection and recovery. We have a 100% owned collection team. So we can 100% rely on it. And we have a complete hierarchy structure to handle it. Then there is again us, which is the most important, is customer grievance and after sales services. A robust team is deployed, a digital practice is done, SMS and the phone calls are there. A department is set to handle all such things that can actually convince and satisfy the customer and make them delight. Thank you. So this was the short journey of Sevagrah Rin, and these are the main points on which we have actually established this organization and make it a success till date. Over to Shruti ma'am.
Thank you, Somesh. So the model of Sevagrah Rin Limited, which is slightly different from other affordable housing companies, actually showcases the different kind of credit assessment or credit evaluation norms or formats that can be developed, and to scale up this particular model in the informal sector. The kind of volume one needs to generate or the scaling up one needs to do at a rapid pace can be enabled by technology intermediation, which to certain extent Sevagrah Rin has tried to do through the loan origination and loan management system. The front ending of technology does require a heavy amount of intermediation from the supply side, that is from the housing finance companies, because to our surprise, when we, and maybe that can be corroborated by other panelists as well, when we started looking at the kind of mobile technology used by our customers, barely 18 to 19% of them have smartphones. So technology can streamline back office and middle office, but the front end requires this kind of heavy touch point, and that is where the well-trained empathetic team or staff members are required to gain the kind of trust which David emphasized about. So moving on to a newer other aspect of affordable housing is when a property title cannot be converted into fully formal or a progressive one, and therefore what can an element of trust coupled with technical assistance can do. So that is the second video which we have from Mahila Housing Trust, and the it showcases the case study of Bhanuben Jadhav. So let's have that particular video playing now.
મારું નામ ભાનુબેન નરેન્દ્રભાઈ જાદવ છે. મારો અમદાવાદનો જન્મ છે. મારે 50 વર્ષની ઉંમર છે. હું 10 ધોરણ સુધી અમદાવાદમાં અભ્યાસ કર્યો છે. મારા લગ્ન પણ અમદાવાદમાં થયેલા, અને મારે 2 બાબા છે. અત્યારે એક પુત્ર વધુ પણ છે. અત્યારે મારા હસબન્ડને સુરતમાં નોકરી હોવાથી મારા લગ્ન પછી અમારે સુરત જવાનું થયું. ત્યાં પોતાનું રહેવા માટેનું ઘર નહોતું. ત્યાં એક રૂમમાં 250 રૂપિયા ભાડું ભરીને અમે 7 જણ એક રૂમમાં રહેતા હતા. એક જ રૂમ હોવાથી મચ્છરદાનીવાળા પલંગ ઘરમાં હતો, તો તેમાં પડદા બાંધીને અમે રહેલા છીએ. ત્યાર પછી મારા દિયરના લગ્ન થઈ જવાથી અમે અમારું મકાન અલગથી ભાડેથી લીધું. પણ માર્કેટમાં મંદી આવવાથી ત્યાં છોકરાનું ભણવાનું અને ઘરનું ભાડું ભરવાનું થોડું મુશ્કેલ થયું, એટલે અહીંયા અમદાવાદમાં મકાન લેવાનો વિચાર કરી અને મેં મારી બેનને વાત કરી કે મકાન વેચાતું હોય તો લેવું છે. એટલે અહીંયા એક આ પતરાવાળું મકાન અત્યારે જ્યાં હું રહું છું તે આ વેચાતું હતું. તો ત્યારે મારી પાસે 1 લાખ રૂપિયાની બચત હતી. એ બચત એમાંથી મેં આ મકાન ખરીદ્યું. એ પતરાવાળું મકાન હતું એટલે આખા ઘરમાં પતરા પણ તૂટેલા હતા અને દિવસે દિવસે તાપમાન વધતું જતું, એટલે મારું સિલાઈ કામ પણ ન થતું, મારા છોકરાનું લેસન પણ ન થતું બરાબર. અને વરસાદમાં આખા ઘરમાં પાણી પડે એટલે ટીવી કોમ્પ્યુટર વારંવાર બગડી જતા, એટલે એના વારંવાર ખર્ચા આવતા. અને ત્યાર પછી મારા છોકરા પણ મોટા થયા એટલે એમના માગ આવવા લાગ્યા, પણ પતરા જોઈને એને છોકરીઓ કોઈ લગ્ન માટે હા નહોતી પાડતી. એટલે એના માટે વિચાર કરીને કે હવે મારે ધાબુ ભરવું છે. તો મને ક્યાંકથી માહિતી મળી કે બેંકમાંથી હાઉસિંગ લોન મળે છે મકાન બનાવવા માટેની. એટલે હું પ્રાઇવેટ અને સરકારી બંને બેંકમાં મારા ઘરના દસ્તાવેજ લઈને ત્યાં બેંકમાં લોન માટે પૂછપરછ કરી. તો ત્યાં મને પાન કાર્ડ, રિટર્ન અને દસ્તાવેજ માંગેલો. મારા ઘરના કાગળિયા જોયા એટલે ત્યાં મને ચોખ્ખી ના પાડી દીધી કે આ દસ્તાવેજ ઉપરથી આ તમારા કાચા કાગળ છે, આના ઉપરથી તમને કોઈ જ બેંકમાં લોન ના મળે અને અમે પણ ના આપીએ. એટલે ત્યારે ખૂબ પછતાવો થયો કે કશું ના જોયું. જમીન માલિક કે જમીન પ્રાઇવેટ છે, સરકારી છે, કોઈ નકશો ના જોયો, કોઈ તપાસ કર્યા વગર મકાન ખરીદી લીધું અને પછી આટલી તકલીફ પડી. પછી એના માટે હું અને અહીંયા કંઈ કશી સુવિધા નહોતી, એટલે હું 2005થી MSTમાં જ્યારે જોડાઈ ત્યાર પછી અહીંયા બધી સુવિધા આવી. અને એટલે મને MST ઉપર મને વિશ્વાસ હતો કે હવે મને MSTમાંથી કંઈક મને મળશે, રસ્તો મને મળશે કંઈક. એટલે મેં MSTમાં મેં વાત કરી, એટલે MSTમાંથી વચ્ચેનો રસ્તો કાઢ્યો. એમને મને એ કલેક્ટર કચેરીથી 7/12નો ઉતારો કઢાવ્યો અને AMCમાંથી પાર્ટ પ્લાન. તો પાર્ટ પ્લાનમાંથી ખબર પડી કે કોઈ રોડ કપાતમાં ઘર નથી અને 7/12ના ઉતારામાં પણ ખબર પડી કે જમીન પ્રાઇવેટ છે, સરકારી નથી. એટલે ત્યાંથી પછી મને 3.5 લાખની લોન મને MSTમાંથી મને મળી અને એ 3.5 લાખથી મકાન એ મારું બનાવવાનું શરૂ કર્યું. પણ મકાનનો ખર્ચ વધી ગયો એટલે મારા દાગીના વેચ્યા, પછી સગાવાલા જોડે પણ થોડા પૈસા લઈ અને 3 માળનું મકાન મેં 12 લાખના ખર્ચે મારું મકાન બનાવ્યું. અને એ મકાન બની ગયા પછી 1 વર્ષની અંદર જ મારા બાબાનું લગ્ન પણ થઈ ગયા. એ મારા છોકરા એટલું બધું ભણેલા અને કોઈ વ્યસન નહીં, કશું નહીં, તો સારી જગ્યાએ એના લગ્ન પણ ન થાત. અને અમારા જીવનમાં થોડો બહુ જ ફરક આવ્યો. અને જે સિલાઈ કામ મારાથી નહોતું થતું, બહુ તાપ લાગતો, એમાં એ કામ પણ વધી ગયું અને અમે અત્યારે પહેલાં કરતાં ખૂબ મારા જીવનમાં ફરક આવ્યો. મારા છોકરાના જીવનમાં પણ ખૂબ ફરક આવ્યો છે. એ MSTમાંથી લોન મળી એના માટે મને મારા જીવનમાં ફરક આવ્યો.
Thank you. So nothing can emphasize the underlying ideology or the underlying objective that most of Seva institutions focus on, which is to consider a housing loan or a home finance as a productive loan. Because for most of our customers and the experience that one has through Seva and through various other development projects, that most of these people do use their work as use their home as a workplace. And I mean, if you fast forward it to 2020, when we all went into lockdown and the pandemic that has hit us globally, the work from home became a new normal. So even for most formal segment or informal segment, work is, home is a very important place, and therefore the kind of living conditions improvement that Bhanuben talked about, the change in the socio-economic stature that her family experienced by having a proper, safe and secured home, that was brought about initially by leap of faith from Mahila Housing Trust, because they helped her to have this kind of alternative means of securing her property titles through this the collector's office and also from the AMC, the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation. So this in many ways has also formed a basis for some of the product design that we at Sevagrarin has done. And of course, we also brought along with us some of the experiences that we had from our banking and project finance or microfinance past work experience. So moving forward, I will now ask Bijal Brahmbhatt to do the presentation. Bijal Ben's bio profile is there for everyone to see, but she brings along with her more than 25 years of experience of working in Mahila Housing Seva Trust to set it up as a very remarkable institution, which focuses not only on one particular aspect of urbanization, but also works on the provision of basic infrastructure, also focuses on slum development or slum rehabilitation, and also focuses on different kind of affordable housing provisions that could be done through providing this kind of loans, or also through the newer aspect of climate change and the green housing. So in her presentation, now she will touch upon the in situ slum development that Mahila Housing Trust has done through a very important vertical of Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana called in situ slum development. So over to you, Bijal Ben, to take this forward, please.
Thank you, Shruti Ben. Okay, so as Shruti Ben said, this is a case study from the in situ slum redevelopment vertical under the Housing for All mission of the Government of India. And the Government of India, as we all know, has hosted the Housing for All mission and aims to give housing to more than 18 million low-income group low-income group residents by 2022. I am focusing on the left-hand side. You will see the first vertical, which is the in situ slum redevelopment, and where Mahila Housing Trust has actually worked, and it's a case study about that. Next. If you look at the overall state-wise progress under the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana or the Housing for All mission, Uttar Pradesh stands first, and Gujarat stands second in terms of numbers, but in terms of percentage progress, if you see of completed houses, Uttar Pradesh is still way below Gujarat, and Gujarat is the highest with 68% of completed houses. And what are some of the reasons why Gujarat is the highest will be elaborated through this case study. Next. So if you look at the progress of housing under various verticals, you will see that the vertical of ISSR, in situ slum rehabilitation, which is second on the slide, shows only completed houses as 28,466, which is the lowest, meaning that this vertical actually is a very, very difficult vertical. The progress has been very slow. Even though it's the highest in Gujarat, it's the slowest amongst the all four verticals. So what is ISSR? It's actually government has invited private sector developers to come in and construct housing for free for doing in situ redevelopment in exchange for transfer of developmental rights or getting more floor space index in other areas where they own their own land. They are supposed to give free housing to the poor on the slum where they are staying. But it has been a very slow progressing vertical and with the highest progress in Gujarat. And the case study will elaborate why it has been progressing in Gujarat as compared to other states. Next. So as I said, the total projects of ISSR in India are to date about 178. And of the 178, Gujarat is the leading state of implementation of ISSR, which is with 117 projects. And even within that, I think Ahmedabad, the city of Ahmedabad is doing the best, where actually Mahila Housing Trust is headquartered. So my presentation now will focus on what we did at the city level and the state level, what kind of partnerships were there, what kind of changes were brought in so that the policy became more pro-poor. Next. So this policy was actually declared in 2010. So it's almost been almost 11 years now. When the policy was initially declared in 2010, what was the experience? The slum policy was only on website. No hard copies were available. And as you know, the poor actually don't have access to online. As Shrutiben just said, only 18% of their customer have even access to mobile. Forget the internet connection that they need. So it was not accessible to the poor. A lot of the policy elements were like FSI, etc., were quite technical and the poor could not understand it. The slum dwellers were then, because they could not understand it, they were not confident about the policy. And initially, the policy required that the sites would be allocated to developers who brought in consent from the slum dwellers on a first come, first served basis. So what happened actually was that, multiple private developers started going to the slums, contacting only men and offering, offering the many, trying to lure them to give consent to their company for developing them. So they would say, we will offer you a TV, or we will offer you free furniture, etc. And multiple such developers would approach the slum dwellers. So there was a lot of mistrust developed. And the government, of course, had no interest in discussing the policy with slum dwellers, because one of the things that we understood is that, once you declare a policy and if it is given over to the private sector for implementation, like in this case, the government just reduces its responsibility. One, also regulatory responsibility, and two, also doesn't want to talk to the slum dwellers directly, and they think that it is the responsibility of the private developer. And of course, the private developer does not know how to talk to the slum dweller. There is a lot of mistrust with multiple institutions approaching them. Next. So what we did was we started doing rigorous outreach and awareness generation about the policy. We insisted on the policy getting translated into the local language with the municipal corporation. And who joined, because we were talking of going vertical, and usually slums are horizontal. So what kind of slum settlements actually choose to join initially this policy? So these were people who were in no way getting basic services like water and sanitation. They had tried for years also with Mahila Housing Trust, but they were not getting water and access to sanitation, etc. And these were slum settlements who were fearing displacement either by the government or by private land owners, and there were rumors that they will get displaced, really chose to go in for this policy, even though at that moment in 2010, it was a ground plus 3 going vertical, initially in 2010. And so they chose to go vertical because they were getting the legal title, and they were also sort of, rest assured that with the legal title, no one will displace them. So what we did is we started organizing joint meetings of residents with the builders. The scheme, the first thing that it required was to understand who all were the slum dwellers who were eligible and who all won't be. So we started conducting surveys to collect photo identification and resident proof. But what happened was that the survey data revealed that a lot of the residents who were residing there for quite some time could not fulfill the eligibility due to the lack of documents. Can we go to next? Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So what was required? It was required by the policy that there is a 25-year domicile in Gujarat, initially in 2010, and there is a 10-year stay in that particular slum. Now, the proofs that were asked for by the government were a copy of the ration card, which is the public distribution system card. Here, actually, the year of issuance was not mentioned. So when the government declared these documents for the eligibility, they did not go through them. So if the year of issuance is not mentioned, then you cannot prove your residence since past 10 years, or even the domicile in Gujarat for 25 years. Copy of electricity bills were asked for, and the legal electrification in slums had only happened in 2002. And so 10 years of stay requirement was not being fulfilled. So what we did was we went the other way around. We started surveying what were the additional documentary proofs that bore both the year of residence. So it could show your term of residence, and also it could show your address were collected from the ground. So these were mortgage bills for jewelry, your birth certificates, your death certificates, your school leaving certificates, etc. So we then advocated with the government, and the last sentence that you see in this slide, which was added to the policy later on, which said any other proof as decided by the prescribed authority. So the prescribed authority was the city government itself. And so they this last element was added to the policy, and that allowed the city government to consider other proofs like what we found from the ground, and make the slum dwellers eligible to the extent possible. So almost 75 to 80% of the slum dwellers became eligible. Next. Again, I think 25 years of domicile, proving 25 years of domicile in Gujarat was very, very, very difficult. And we saw that the policy could not progress, the program could not progress at all. So it was with the developers. We made a joint advocacy to the government. And the 25 years of domicile was later on removed from the policy. And that's how the policy was changed. What were the next steps then? So the developers actually realized that it would be very difficult for them to convince the slum dwellers, because the slum dwellers actually had to leave their places of residence in the slum, vacate their houses, and go into transition housing. Later on, the builders decided not to construct transit housing, but only pay rent to the slum dwellers on a monthly basis till their houses were given back, newly constructed houses were given back to them. So they decided, so it was the developers who decided to sort of agree to a memorandum of understanding with Mahila Housing Trust. So what we lobbied with the municipal corporation after the MOU was that each and every household in the slum should get a letter from the municipal corporation, not from the developer, from the municipal corporation, signed by the municipal corporation, because it was their program and not the developer's program, saying that their slum had been included in the policy. And it was due to my MHT's efforts that this happened. And we also designed iCard. So a broad policy actually did not give the implementation steps of how the program would get converted on the ground. And we started designing iCards with photograph, which had to be signed by the municipal corporation. We insisted that the municipal corporation sign, the developer sign, we sign, and there was a resident welfare association which was required to be registered, and a committee representative from the community signed on there. And then, of course, there were other issues on ensuring clarity on legal ownership of land. Negotiations, we also supported the slum dwellers in negotiating the rent with the developers. So each and every slum dweller actually had a separate rent agreement with the developer. All this was not spelled out into the policy, and this was developed by the Mahila Housing Trust in conjunction with the community and the developer. Next. So this is a letter issued to the to the households in the slum by the municipal corporation. We got them to sign it and not the developer, because it was their scheme, so that they do not forget their regulatory load. And this is the iCard which was developed, a photo iCard which was developed, which would ensure that all those who had iCards would get a house back into the reconstructed scheme. Next. So what was the pre-construction mobilization process? As I said, a preliminary survey to assist the developer and the AMC to come to a final number of households which was eligible for the program. And as you know, the slums do not have boundaries; they are just organic, and therefore it was very required that the plots be clearly demarcated on the ground, and which is a very difficult task, because you may have something on the map and things may have changed on the ground. And so that demarcation of plots had to be undertaken. Of course, explaining the policy to the slum dwellers. And as I mentioned earlier, negotiating for rent amounts, etc., on behalf of the communities. And each household should have a rent agreement, with a legal rent agreement, which was developed by MHT with the help of advocates, was executed between the developer and the slum households. Next. After that, the households had to vacate, and there was on-site demolition. So the people had to vacate the site for the developer, which was a really tough task, convincing them, even though this process was undertaken, because they have been living there for years and they still don't have the trust whether they were asked to sort of vacate the plot, and when whether they will get back their housing. So what we did was that every month we actually, remained present when the rental money was being provided by the builder through to the communities. Some communities wanted it in cash, but a lot of it also went for check arrangements. The building plans were prepared by the builders, but there was a consultation that MHT organized with the slum communities, and brought in the and looked at their needs in terms of small needs, which could easily be incorporated. They did, for example, they wanted it well ventilated. They did not want, in the entrance itself, they did not want toilets. Such houses, looking at the culture of India, would not be accepted very easily. Their resident welfare associations had to be registered before the scheme actually began. The plan had to be approved by the AMC, and we actually developed a partnership where we insisted that the plan had also to be signed by the representatives of the resident welfare association, because they were representing the poor and they should be in the agreement with the kind of plan which was being proposed by the developer. Next. After the construction, a draw happened for the dwelling units, which was again assisted by MHT. And there was assistance for giving possessions. Initially, there were no possession letters. Physical possessions were given, but initially there were no possession letters given. And we insisted that possession letters with photographs and affidavits be given to the, to all the residents. So all this was brought in. Later on, we organized trainings for the Resident Welfare Association, because their slum was registered as a cooperative housing society. The trainings were organized for the Resident Welfare Association, their duties, and also the members of the Resident Welfare Association of the cooperative housing society, because ultimately they chose who the committee members would be, and they should understand their roles better. Their bank accounts had to be opened with MHT's assistance. And then, of course, behavioral change trainings were given for cleanliness. There were formation of subcommittees to handle common electricity, water, and elevator related maintenance, because this policy got changed again in 2013. And in 2013, one of the things which was not desired by the slum dwellers, but we could not stop it, is that from the ground plus 3 housing, which did not require elevator, it went up to ground plus 7, which required elevators. And one of the issue of not having elevators was the kind of maintenance costs that would be involved once you have elevators in a housing colony. Next. Next. What were some of the policy influences? I already discussed some as a part of the program implementation. But what made it a success? So initially, slum dwellers have mixed use of their housing. A lot of them use it as their shops, as their workplaces. And initially, shops were not included because this was a residential scheme. And then when the policy got changed in 2013, we really insisted that, shops should be included in these residential apartments. And then later on, the shops were also included in the residential development. So all the shop owners of, the residential housing got shops as well. Next. In 2010, the initial carpet area was 36 square meter. In 2013 policy, the government just reduced it to 25 square meter. And, the people, we were conducting exposure visits of the slum dwellers to these housing sites. and the people were not really actually ready to accept the 25 square meter. So a lot of, so 25 square meter was the minimum that the developer had to give. There was no limit to the maximum. So we picked up on this clause and we actually started negotiating with the municipal corporation and the developer. And we were able to increase, at least in Ahmedabad, from 25 square meters to a housing which was 30 square meters. And there were a lot of people who were residing there, but still did not have eligibility proofs since last 10 years. And the project got stalled because of the 20% of the beneficiaries which were failing to produce proof of residency. So we said, let's give them an option. To the extent possible, everyone should be included. So if there were households who could not produce any eligible proofs, we came to a conclusion with the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation that they had to pay 300,000 rupees, 3 lakh rupees in Indian rupees. And the government would facilitate loans with the banks and housing finance companies, and they could get the housing. This was to reduce the opposition against the project and to make it more inclusionary. Now, the amount of 3 lakh rupees was actually arrived at because, housing under the economically weaker section, which is constructed by the government under the other scheme, costs around 3 lakh rupees. There was a youth Sabarmati Riverfront development project in Ahmedabad, and all the poor were also given housing costing 3 lakh rupees. So that element, we fell back upon that element and made the change in the policy. Next. Also, all this we were able to do because Mahila Housing Trust was a member of the Slum Rehabilitation Committee, which was actually set up by the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation. So ourselves, the municipal corporation, the representatives of the collectorate, were all on a common committee, and this committee used to meet time and again to discuss issues and for clearance of projects. So over a period of time, because we were there in the committee and we are still there in the committee, we could bring about these changes. Maintenance was a big issue, and since this was a very high class asset, for the first time we found in our lives that there was a lot of resistance from the men to actually allow women to negotiate or to talk or to come for meetings. So we later on introduced a provision of bringing about 50% women in the Resident Welfare Association as members. So, and we are now trying to train and empower the women so that they can execute some control. So this is a copy of the resolution that was passed by the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation in September 2019 to bring about 50% women in the Resident Welfare Association. Next. So now what has happened? Because the municipal corporation actually has taken this up as a premium earning, as money earning vehicle rather than providing housing to the poor. So the developer actually gives a premium to the municipal corporation. From 7 stories now, somewhere in some sites where the plans do not fit, they make it a 10-story apartment with elevators. And the biggest concern with this program right now is that it will require a very rigorous maintenance regime. And, the initial maintenance amount is given by the developer, but it is only 7,500 rupees per household. And our experience is that with elevators, the monthly maintenance is going to come somewhere around 1,400 to 1,500 rupees for these slum dwellers. And that's going to become a big problem. And a huge amount needs to be invested into training them to maintain and how do you really pay up the maintenance. Next. A big challenge, look at this house now. This used to be in one of the slums. So people have invested over a period of time. This house also has an air conditioner, as you see, and it is still in a slum without a legal title. So when you have households which have more than a single story like this, a 50 square meter housing, it's very, very difficult to convince people to demolish this kind of housing and go into a vertical apartment. That is still a big challenge. Next. There are still some slum settlements, like this person is making shoes at his house. These are actually women who are making pots and pans out of mud and require a huge horizontal expanse. And such kind of livelihoods still have no space, although shops have been included in the vertical housing apartments that are being raised up by the government. Next. The eligibility date still remains the year 2010. So the scheme was introduced in 2010. It has been 11 years now, but the cutoff date still remains 2010, and it needs to be revised into the current scenario. Also, the other big issue is that there is no money invested by the government for capacity building of these poor members or the resident welfare associations to actually manage and maintain these housing complexes. And that is one of the fear that we are having, which will, over the years, and we are trying ourselves to build the capacities, but we are also dependent on donors to build the capacity, and it's a long process. It's not an easy process to build the capacity to be able to manage and maintain both their associations and their housing complexes. So these are some of the challenges which are still existing. But this case study is actually to answer, because I get these questions everywhere. So the government, the program is from the government, and the developer is doing the construction for free. So what are you doing, MHT? That is being asked by several government functionaries, by developmental associations, by people who don't understand the key role that we play as a facilitator, as a trust building organization, and the policy influencer. Our policy influence is actually more effective, because we start from developing a policy, we execute it on the ground, and we come back with the feedback after the ground execution. And that kind of a policy influence, in my opinion, proves to be most effective rather than only a research-based policy influence. With that, I will end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Bijal Ben. That was excellent presentation on the one of the most, I would say, slowest growing vertical of Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, and the role of intermediary which has been played by MHT, both for policy advocacy with the government level, while understanding the ground reality from the communities and from the household who are having this kind of informal income. That goes a long way in actually having a very enabling environment, and to have a successful implementation of such a project where all kind of coordination and communication is required between various parties or various stakeholders. I will not elaborate it any further, because we have the last presentation, which is from Mr. Kulshekhara Chakravarti. To us, I'll just give a brief introduction to Chakravarti sir. For Sevagrarian Limited and the people, most of us who are on the panel, we know Mr. Chakravarti very well. Mr. Chakravarti has been part of National Housing Bank, and he has more than 36 years of banking experience. But within NHB, he has held various profiles, including on resource generation, including refinancing, and currently on market research and statistical documentation. For us, Mr. Chakravarti is the go-to person as far as Sevagrarian is concerned, because for Sevagrarian, NHB has been an investor, NHB has also been a refinancer, NHB has also been a regulator, and now currently our supervisor. So with that, I would ask Chakravarti sir to take it forward, and please present to us about the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana and NHB's work on informal tenure and informal income.
You're on mute, sir.
Sir, you are on mute. Sir, you are still on. Okay. Can anyone hear him?
No, I think he's on double mute. He's got his microphone working, but he's got something else in his computer that's not enabling the sound to get through.
Can Mahila Housing Trust call him and support, please?
Yes, Visual Converge is doing that.
Aneri Konika, were you able to speak with him?
Yes, Shrutiji, our IT team is actually speaking. Our IT head is speaking to him.
Sure, sure.
So can you speak something? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
So one second. Give me 1 minute. I'll call you back. Hello. Yes, sir. Sir, we can hear you on the Zoom platform as well. Hello.
I think, sir, you will have to switch off the microphone either on your the headphones that you had or on your any other mobile or anything that you have on currently. Yes, but I guess it's with echo, is it?
Yes, yes, yes. I think it is on the mobile. Can you hear me now? No. Hello.
We can hear you now, but the voice is low.
And it's echoing as well. I don't know, maybe he has logged in from two systems. I don't know.
Perhaps, Shruti, you could take questions from people while Chakravarti sir is trying to get his audio to work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just to better utilize the time, I believe we can start with the first question, or maybe there is another one. The main important, the loan product that MHT extended to Bhanuben. So question is that what is the semi-mortgage loan and what is the product that was extended to Bhanuben?
So the semi-mortgage loan actually is where you have a progressive tenure. So you don't have a complete title, but you have some papers to prove that you are a resident of that house, and you have some papers which ensures that you will not be evicted by the municipal corporation. So for example, the part plan actually allowed us to see that they will not be evicted by the municipal corporation because there is no road or the passing through the slum, or it's not reserved for any public purpose. And it was, I think, a tenure of 7 years at around 18% of interest rate.
Okay, sure. The other question was on the capital raise and how challenging it is. So
I think Shruti, you should take this up. It's a good question.
So the question was, what are the challenges in raising capital for this new model of HFC, both for equity and debt? Of course, I mean, yes, since the proof of the pudding lies in actually eating that pudding, so one has to implement the the kind of work plan that is in place. So I'll just briefly speak about Sevagrarin and how it was done. And David can vouch for it, because when we started off, it was merely a plan on paper, and more necessarily in this tech-enabled environment, it was a plan on Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel. But with the robust system and the kind of scaling up that we showcase,
can you hear me now?
With the good portfolio quality.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, yes, sir.
We can hear you.
Yeah. So we'll take that up later on.
Okay,
Please,
right.
sir.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is the challenge we have to face. Anyway, first at the outset, let me thank you for giving the opportunity to be with Mahila Housing Seva Trust on the Silver Jubilee occasion. Now, let me not go into the details. Now, about National Housing Bank, we are Apex Housing Finance Institution. As told by Shruti ji earlier, we were a regulator, now we are a supervisor. But we have two other roles. One is financing, another is development of housing finance market. Okay, so as part of this, we do that. Now, we have got 102 registered companies, and we are a central nodal agency for under the CLSS, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, CLSS. This is a brief introduction of our activity, but I'll come back to the main, the theme of today's webinar. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So earlier, the affordable housing fund, we run a affordable housing fund, but as someone earlier speakers told that income up to 3 lakhs is EWS and income up to 6 lakhs is low income housing, and both put together is treated as affordable housing. And if it is linked to area, it is 30 square meters and 60 square meters carpet area. Any housing given to these borrowers with income below 6 lakhs or units below 60 square meters carpet area are treated as affordable housing units as per government's definition. What is the role we play? Earlier we had something called rural housing fund, exclusively catering to the rural segment, and we had something called urban housing fund, catering to the urban population, urban poor rather. And now from 1819 onwards, we merged both of them into what is called an affordable housing fund, and we extend refinance to housing finance companies. This is our activity. Now, I'll come back to one of the questions Mr. Sumesh raised. A mortgage is not a precondition for a loan to be treated as a housing loan. It is an activity. Any loan that is given for construction for housing is called a housing loan. So therefore, but it is a prerogative of the lender that any asset created out of the funds given to the borrower is taken as a primary security. Therefore, the necessity for a mortgage arises. But that is a conventional thinking of a housing loan. But it is not a precondition for a loan to be treated as a loan. But I'll give you a parallel example. If we give a loan against property, which is against a mortgage, that is not treated as a housing loan. But mortgage is there. Therefore, the precondition is that the loan should be given for construction or improvement of a house. This is a precondition, not the mortgage per se. Can we go to the next slide? I will just tell you, we have run a program with World Bank in 2000, it was in 13-14 to 18-19, it was there. I don't know if you are able to see. This was a unique program in the world actually. The reason why we are sharing it with you, nowhere in the world we have done a pilot program where mortgage is not a precondition, nor formal income is not a precondition. In this, it was a line of credit we got from the World Bank for about $100 million, which is about 612 crores. And the income criteria was 3 lakhs per annum, which is just equivalent to our EWS. And it was in urban areas. It was both for construction and purchase of new dwelling units, or extension and upgradation also. No mortgage was a precondition. But how did we did it? How did we did it? Very often it is group guarantee. And someone before me asked a question, what is semi-formal title? Now, in a formal title, you can mortgage and the mortgagee will get a right to sell. But in a semi-formal title, it is tenural right. The household can stay in that, but they cannot sell or mortgage this house. That is called a semi-formal title. And exactly this is what we also planned and we implemented in some of the states like Rajasthan. We had done it, where tenural rights are there. The slum dwellers or whoever is occupying that cannot be evicted, but they may not be able to mortgage that particular property to get a loan. But even against that, since there is a tenural right, they have got a right to power, right to water. We said that formal financial institutions should go and extend credit so that their habitat can be improved. And that was a huge success. And we did it in record time of 3 years was a time given, and we did it in 3 years. And just to share with you, just see refinance. We are mainly into refinancing because the front ending is done by all housing finance companies and banks. And last year and 2 years, most of the refinance has been through housing finance companies. About 88% of the housing has gone to housing finance companies and not banks. If you see 62.8 thousand units, 62,000 units, 62,800 units have gone to units where the loan is between 5 to 10 lakhs. The maximum number of units are there. If you take loan up to 25 lakhs, most of the units, except for about 7,000 units, most of the refinance is given to units which fall within our definition of affordable housing. So why I'm showing is that NHB as a refinancing institution, as a developing financing institution, our focus is on promoting and financing affordable housing. So therefore we are there up to 25 lakhs. Our focus is to fund and refinance affordable housing segment. Can we go to the next slide, please? Now, coming back to PMAY CLSS, while all of us talk CLSS, let me also run through the other programs. Affordable housing in partnership, beneficiary-led construction, in situ slum redevelopment or rehabilitation, what Bijal ji has spoken, and now CLSS. Now CLSS is loan linked. I will speak less about it because there's a big role for us to play in the other three segments. Now, in fact, I was also talking to Shruti ji some time back. BLC, builder-led construction, some statistics of only one state was given. 110,000 units were sanctioned, only 33 was grounded. Now, there is a huge requirement of 77,000 units required there. And mind you, here, central government is giving a subsidy of 1.5 lakhs. Probably state government is giving a subsidy of 1 lakh or 1,50,000. So if the cost of the unit is 6 lakhs, almost 2 to 3 lakhs is being subsidized. Now they require a unit, they require a loan of 3 to 4 lakhs. Normally, borrowers under BLC have the land. Either it could be informal title or not so clear title, but they are in possession of land, which is certified and approved by both state government and central government. Only then they are eligible for a subsidy. They are eligible. So I think there's a huge potential for the markets to intervene in this segment, and it is a captive market for us to go and intervene. We have to liaise with the nodal officers, each of the states, where they have got the list of the borrowers who were given subsidy under the BLC. And huge, in a state of Gujarat itself, 70,000 people are waiting to be completed. Now extrapolated to rest of India, just to share with you, it's 65 lakh units are waiting to be completed. So that is a huge potential. Now going back to some, we have been quoting 18.7 million units or 1.87 crores. This was reassessed in 2014-15. They did, the Ministry of Housing did what is called a demand survey and assessed that right now the requirement is about 1 crore units. And mind you, 1 crore units, about 95% is under EWS and LIG. So we are not worried about the other segment. So affordable housing requires huge lot of intervention. Government is doing, but government alone cannot do. All the institutions like Mahila Housing Seva Trust, Seva Grih Rin, and Mr. David rightly pointed out there should be 20. Probably for a country like India, there should be 200 Seva Grih Rins. Because there's, as far as I know, out of the 102, there's only one Seva Grih Rin which is catering primarily with a focus on women. And in fact, I don't know, the inspiration for Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana has been the state of Gujarat, or I don't know why. It's a coincidence. Otherwise, if you see all the programs where they say women should be a co-borrower, it is a precondition. It is a precondition for CLSS to be eligible. Women, if there is an adult woman in the family, she has to be a co-borrower. Only in cases where there is no adult woman in the family, only then it is exempted, which is very rare. So I think your experiment done by Mahila Housing Seva Trust and their own feedback to the government of Gujarat, probably to government of India, has been the driving force behind the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. And for your information, till now, it was launched in July 2015, 25,141 crores of subsidy was released through all the PLIs. This is the highest number of, and the number of beneficiaries were approximately 11 lakh households have benefited by this. So this is the intervention government is doing, but certainly it is not enough. There is a huge requirement and potential for private sector to play a role. Now let me come back and also share with you. Now there is one argument that banks are not able to reach to this segment because of their rigidity in reaching out to the last mile. Therefore, there is a requirement for institutions like Sevagrihan, which is an NBFC or a housing finance companies. So NBFCs will play a big role in reaching out to the last mile borrowers. In servicing here, the borrowers don't give payment through checks. So both giving the loan and recovering the loan is a big challenge. They have to do it as Shrutiji has shared. Only 20% of them have mobiles which are smartphones. So daily, all the people in Sevagrihan or any other company daily have to touch base with borrowers, collect as much as possible, 5 rupees, 10 rupees, 20 rupees. So the cost of transaction will be very high. Nevertheless, it will be much, much lower than their alternate cost of borrowing, which is informal sources through money lenders and other sources. So therefore, I think we are the first step for Mahila Housing Trust took probably 15-20 years. But I think the next 10 years or the next 5 years, you will see a sea change. We have come to a stage where we are takeoff stage thanks to the effort by many agencies like Mahila Housing Trust, which have spent, Bijalji, you should not feel that we, having worked for 25 years, it has only reached so far, but you have laid the foundation for what we are doing across India now. Let me share proudly that all the feedbacks and all the efforts and experiments you have done all through the years trying to develop the institute development has borne fruit. And I think while this is going to end in August 2022, it is likely to be extended. I think government will certainly extend and see that more and more people benefit from this. Can I show the next slide, please? This is just to show what NHB has done. This is not very significant. This is just to show that we have done well. But more importantly is that we have done, the first steps are concrete, solid. We are now on our legs. Now, yes, there is much for us to do. All the participants in this particular meeting, all of us have a role to play, including government. Yes, I speak for the government sector, but we can only conceive and we can hold the hand, but last mile delivery has to be done by institutions like Mahila Housing Seva Trust or Sevagrihan. With this, I thank you once again. Any questions? Yes, I will answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Though there was a little bit of technical glitch, but you covered most important aspects of NHB's forays into providing affordable housing, and especially the informal segment credit line that NHB had from World Bank. That is one of its kind in the world or globally speaking. So with that, while you were being kind of helped or aided to do the presentation, we did take up a couple of questions. Since we have run out of time and we are already overshot by 20 minutes, if there is any one particular question that needs answer from the panelists, we'll take that up. Otherwise, it will be, we can conclude this particular webinar on a very happy note. So I can.
Shrutiben, there is a question for Mr. Chakravarti. If you can read it out from the Q&A and then we can close.
Sure. Okay.
Yes, I got it. Can I read it out?
Yes, please.
Semi-formal title that gives a tenure security. Is the right permanent or a term is prescribed? Normally, while the tenure is not there, tenural rights meaning right to stay only. It does not have any period of 10 years or 20 years. And let me also tell you, there are, and can the tenural be passed as a legacy? No. This is only for them, for that particular title holder to stay. Typically, it is for the title holder to stay. But again, you can liaise with the municipal authorities to get a new tenural right for the family. It is not impossible, but yes, is there dispute or loan in legacy or term? What does not? Is there a dispute or lapse in legacy or term? What does the title revert to? Now, what happens is, if, for example, I am a tenural holder, I am permitted to stay there. I cannot sell, I cannot bequeath this property to any one of my offspring. This is a limitation of the tenurial right. But now what happens is, typically you can go back and apply. One of my offsprings, my son or probably my wife, can go and apply once again to the municipal authorities who grant the tenurial right, saying that, and to show proof that she was my wife, and after me she should be permitted to stay. Very often they will do it. Let me also tell you, it is politically difficult for any governments to evict people who are in slums. I'm not saying that it is a right, but I'm just giving you assurance that people will not be evicted. So therefore, formal financing institutions, though they can't create a mortgage through a group guarantee or some other alternately secured, the way we secured is that in cases there is jewelry, in cases there is deposit, you can take that as collateral and give a housing loan. Did I answer the query, or any probably if you want I can subsequently mail the subsequently also. I could get it. It is only for the right to stay only. It is not right. In fact, I will give an example. In Orissa, they give Jaga Mission was promoted. They give tenurial lands, tenurial rights to all the people who are staying in their particular slums or someplace. The limitation was this is a tenurial right. So they cannot create a mortgage. They were not able to get loans on that. So that has to be addressed in the notification itself. So somewhere it has to be addressed. It can be alternately secured. This title cannot be mortgaged, but it can be alternately secured. Anyway, I can speak on this separately because we are running out of time. It just took 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you, sir. No, that I think that addressed the query very well. I have seen the question answer box, and most of the queries addressed to the panelists have already been answered. So on this note, let us conclude this webinar on affordable housing and housing finance. We covered a lot of ground from the perspective of technical assistance provider, that is Affordable Housing Institute, and its perspective of supporting or seeding a new age or a newer model of HFC in growing economy. We also understood the emphasis of a hand-holding or an facilitating agency or the intermediary role that is extensively being played out by Mahila Housing Trust through various means, through various projects, whether it was slum rehabilitation, whether it is the in-situ slum redevelopment, or gaining the trust of community and making them aware about their rights through policy advocacy, and therefore providing them a smaller amount of loan just to showcase and pilot the work as far as affordable housing to informal titles or progressive titles is concerned. And we also understood the challenges and the way in which the scaling up of affordable housing can be done through a model like Seva Agrarian Limited, where both informal income and informal property titles are addressed. Well, as a moderator, the overall volume or the quantum that is required to actually address affordable housing needs in India is humongous. There is definitely a business opportunity over here, and there is definitely a lot of room as far as intermediation with government authorities, with public and private partnership is concerned, and also with the investment or donor fraternity. So on that note, let me conclude this webinar, and also I would urge everyone to give a round of applause to Mahila Housing Trust on their celebration of 25 years of their journey.
Happy birthday, Mahila Housing Trust.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.